does God care about the earth? And I would argue, based on Genesis, that he does. Because every verse of Genesis, or practically every verse, he says, and he saw that it was good. He did this, and he saw that it was good. He did that, and created that, and he saw that it was good. And he finishes up, and he says, he saw that it was very good. So whether you believe God created the heavens and the earth, or whether you believe it was the Big Bang and the formation of stars and nebulas that collapsed and planetesimals that collided with one another and an earth that accreted. Either way, it was good. God saw that it was good. So that would imply to me that from a Christian point of view, creation is worth saving. Creation is worth protecting. From a non-Christian point of view, from an atheistic or an agnostic point of view, it's worth protecting as well, because it's our lifeboat. It's where we live. If we value humans, if we value life, then it's worth protecting.
To follow up on that, and we obviously are wanting to deal with the value of the planet, caring for the planet, and a related question is, what is the basis of the moral imperative, and whether the validity of objective values depends upon the existence of God, or is it possible to say that there's a moral imperative that's binding on everyone, regardless of whether God exists, and why not? So is it possible to have a moral imperative without God in the picture, is the question.
Well, I think it is. So the Bible says love your neighbor. That is the best practice for behavior. That comes from the Bible, but it also comes from humanism. You don't need the Bible to tell you that. As Thomas Jefferson would say, we hold this truth to be self-evident. In cruder terms, it's a no-brainer. It goes without saying. There's a lot of ways to express that. But it's pretty easy to argue that the love your neighbor and what follows the golden rule and basically all the commandments that are important follow from that one rule, and caring for the planet is a direct consequence of that tenet.
Genesis, I agree with you entirely, Mark, that it is a mandate for being a steward of creation. That's the word I like most. And one of my friends was chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And he's written a book on this. It's very warm, if you like, in putting this forward, that God saw it was good and so on. He cares for it. So you ought to care for it. And your second point is equally important. Let me see, can I tease it out a little bit as I see it? You made the point we don't need the Bible to tell us to love our neighbor, because you get the golden rule in every other religion, philosophy, including the Humanist Manifesto. That's absolutely right. Lewis pointed that out in 1940 in the back of a book which I believe everybody should read, called The Abolition of Man. And he pointed out that that's exactly what you would expect if the Bible were right. That human beings are created as moral beings in the image of God, so that whether they believe in God or not, they've got these moral principles and they can come up with a moral imperative. That doesn't quite deal with the question of whether there is a God or not. Now, I want to go, as you will expect, a little bit further than that. I agree with you entirely. I'd go even further in this sense. My atheist friends can put me to shame morally. There's no privileged position for being a Christian. In fact, Christians claim to be people who've recognized that they're not even living up to their own standards of morality and need redemption. They're not putting themselves above others, and we should respect the moral imperative wherever we see it. So I'm with you absolutely there, but let's take the next step down. I spent a lot of time in Russia, and for them Dostoevsky was always a kind of prophet. And he made the famous statement, if God does not exist, everything is permissible. He did not mean that atheists can't behave morally. That's nonsense. What he meant is that rationally, you've got a real problem of getting a moral imperative out of the isness of creation. Now, I was interested in you quoting Thomas Jefferson, because I was just reading him the other day, and here's what he said. God, who gave us life, gave us liberty. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are of the gift of God? That's very interesting coming from him, as you know, for his other philosophies. But that recognition goes very deep. Charles Taylor is one of the world experts on secularism, and he picks up on nature, really, and says the modern age more or less repudiated the idea of a divine lawgiver, has nevertheless tried to retain the ideas of moral right and wrong, not noticing that in casting God aside, they have also abolished the conditions of meaningfulness for moral right and wrong as well. Educated people, says Taylor, do not need to be told, however, that questions such as these have never been answered outside religion. And one incident I remember in Siberia, a Russian academician, and we were talking about these things, and he says, you know, Dostoevsky was such a prophet. I said, how? Well, he said, we thought we could get rid of God and retain a value for human beings. We found out too late that that's impossible. Now, Nietzsche, he saw that. He said, look, you people that feel that you could retain, in contemporary words, a contemporary modern Western liberal philosophy and morality and get rid of God are kidding yourselves. It's impossible. Now, Dawkins, interestingly, goes as near as possible to the edge of that volcano when he says, this universe is exactly like you'd expect it to be if, at bottom, there is no good, no evil, and no justice. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. So that the terrorists who are destroying both the earth and its artifacts and people are just dancing to the music of their DNA. That's the end of all morality. And that's where my major problem comes. And as you probably know, it goes back to David Hume, that it is very difficult to argue from just the sheer isness of the life to what I ought to do. It works brilliantly when you've got little islands of almost equal power. You're an island, and I'm an island. And I say I'm going to do this, and you say you're not, because we'll gang up and stop you. But suppose I get all the power. And you say you ought to do that, and I say, ought? Why ought I? And if you've got nothing higher to refer to, you're really stuck. And that's where we are in the world today, of course. There's a huge moral confusion because we've, for the first really century in history in the West, we've got rid of a vertical dimension of morality, and we've made it all horizontal, and we don't know where to put the parameters of it. So that's how I'd respond to that, having a great deal of sympathy with what you're saying, because I really do believe my atheist friends and skeptical friends and agnostic friends care for the planet, sometimes more than I do. Of course, we've different jobs, but the mandate comes from Genesis, and that's not a reason for not believing in God, because belief in God can wind that up, and of course make it much stronger. If this has got to do with the basic principles of the universe created by God, that's going to help your cause.